Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Chargers rebounded with a Thursday night win over the Vikings. Also, it's the Dodgers in a landslide, right? Well, we may beg to differ. And scandal rocked the NBA unlike anything we've ever seen before.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
There was no charging on Thursday Night Football. The LA Chargers took care of the Carson Wentz-led Minnesota Vikings, 37-10. Justin Herbert tossed 3 touchdown passes, and Charger fans got to breathe easy after, plenty of the close calls over the last few seasons here. Daniel Wade from Locked On Chargers joins me now. And Daniel, this has been a Chargers team that we've seen a number of different versions so far this season. This is among the best we've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a good argument for this being the best that they've looked. I think it just depends on how you feel about the Vikings, especially the, Carson Wentz-led Vikings, who just hung with the Eagles, but how good are the Eagles? Hung with the Steelers, but how good are the Steelers? So I think the one thing you can say definitively is this version that we saw Thursday night is much closer to the version that went 3-0 to start the season, with Joe Alt back in the fold being a huge part of that, than they are the team that went 1-3 the last 4 weeks.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. So why haven't we seen this version over the last month?
I think it's been a combination of things, but it seems like a cop-out to say injuries, but I mean, it's been injuries. I mean, you're down to your third string running back. Najee Harris out for the season. Omarion Hampton on IR. You started over the last few weeks your 5th, 6th, and 7th tackles. Those are important, but I do think tonight was a lot more about the defense as well, who have been outplayed, out-efforted, and out-schemed, right? The last few weeks especially, where you just have wide-open guys, huge blown coverages, big chunk plays. There's a defense that gave up 38 last week to the Colts, who are a buzzsaw to a certain extent, but still, they didn't play well against the Dolphins, and you saw what happened to them last week against the Browns. So this was huge for the Chargers offense to get Joe Alt back, and they looked like an offense that really just needed to give Justin Herbert a little bit of time, and they could be so much better. But I do think a big story here is also the defense getting back on track, getting that pass rush back a little bit. Even with some injuries that they sustained in this game, this is much closer to the Jesse Minter defense that had the #1 scoring defense in the league last year.
Yeah, and we usually think of the offensive line, especially with a star quarterback, in pass protection. But Kamani Vidal had 117 yards on 23 carries and a score in this one. That's over 5 yards a tote. If, as an offense, you can average 5 yards a carry on offense, get to 100 yards with your running back, a backup running back, by the way, that's also vital for your offense.
It's huge. And I think the biggest difference this week is they weren't down 23-3 at halftime, right? Where it's just like the run game becomes totally obsolete when you get up big on someone and then you can impose your will. That is a huge benefit. And I do think it was also nice where Justin Herbert obviously played well outside of one kind of boneheaded play. At the same time, he didn't have to do it all tonight. I still think with how banged up the offensive line is and how bad it's been, I think it's hard for him to get out of that hero ball mode, which I think you saw on the interception that he had, just trying to throw a ball that he should have never, even if it's a tip pass, he should have never thrown that ball. But for him to not have to be hero mode Justin Herbert to go get them a win in this one, which he had to be against the Dolphins, which he had to be against the Broncos. But Kamani Vidal, twice in the last 3 weeks, he's gone over 100 yards. When you're down to your third string running back, who was a 2024 6th round pick that got cut from this team, had to be back on the practice squad and just got elevated to the roster, that is huge for him. And if they can have a running game, something that Justin Herbert, frankly, has never had, that is going to be absolutely huge in them keeping him healthy the rest of the season.
There were some folks who were down on this team when some of the offensive line injuries hit. They didn't play great, but now we saw, I think week 1, right, is probably the other game where you point to and you go, that's the version of this team that can beat anybody in the AFC. They beat probably the other team that you'd be most afraid of, along with the Buffalo Bills. And now this. So what will be the key to sustaining that type of success moving forward? Understanding this is the NFL. You're not going to blow a decent to good team out every week.
Yeah, I think it's about obviously getting guys back and having them stay back, because it still feels like even in this game, when they're blowing the other team out, they're 1 or 2 guys away from being right back to that 1-3 team we saw the last month. But I do think it is about knowing what you have. and playing to that. Like, I mean, the last couple of weeks, we've seen at least a better chance that Justin Herbert's been given with a quick passing game and scheming your offense around knowing that you have a bad offensive line, because even with Joe Alt back, that solves one of 5 problems, man. And there's been games where all 5 of those guys are a problem. So I think it's getting consistent play from the offense, but I do still think that this defense is still going to have to show it against better teams. I mean, you can go back to last year, the Buccaneers, the Ravens, this year against the Colts. Jesse Minter's defense has never really shown up against the top offense. And if this is a team that isn't just, hey, we're happy to make the playoffs type of a team, they're going to have to prove it against some better offenses to get that done. Because as we saw last week with the Colts, a real team, much more real of a team than, the Vikings team that we saw on Thursday night without both of their offensive tackles, they're going to still have a long way to go.
Stay up to date all year on the LA Chargers by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Chargers on your favorite podcast app. Your Locked On Sports Today. Coming up, we make the case for Toronto in the World Series. Before we get to that, we got an NBA Finals rematch last night. The NFL season is rolling along, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for this weekend with can't-miss offers. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however I want to bet in the moment. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick, it's easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. The Pacers hosted the Thunder in an NBA Finals rematch.
Riding the escalator out of Gainbridge Fieldhouse and talking about the Thunder's 141-135 win over the Pacers in this game. The Pacers just ran out of guys. Benedict Mathurin was hooping. He fouls out. That was the one that really got him over the edge. Aaron Nesmith fouled out. Andrew Nembhard got hurt. Ben Shepherd fouled out. They were just out of guys, including their injuries at point guard. They did not have enough to finish the game despite fighting valiantly with what they had. Jarris Walker stepping up, Taylor Peter stepping up. Lots of guys playing very well. Over 30 points from both Pascal Siakam and Benedict Mathurin. They were fighting. Two-man action was working really well for them. But in the end, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 55 points. A bunch of free throws for the Thunder was the differential. Much more on Locked On Pacers.
The Warriors tried to hold off the Nuggets.
If you would have told me before this contest that Aaron Gordon would have literally had one of the greatest three-point shooting performances in NBA history, scored 50 points at Chase Center, and still the Golden State Warriors would find a way to win, I would have called you crazy. But if it would have happened, I would have assumed Steph Curry did something magical. That he did. In the last 2 minutes and 50 seconds of regulation, plus the full 5 minutes of overtime, Steph Curry outscored Denver by himself. Just a high-level basketball game where Curry went for 42, and how many of them were in the second half? 33 of those 42 points in the second half. Golden State just hit big shot after big shot. Aaron Gordon did everything he could. Nikola Jokic had a chance to win it at the buzzer in regulation, and Draymond Green had a nice defensive play to alter the shot. It was a missed 4 or 5 footer, and that'll be the turning point of the game and the reason why the Warriors had a chance to do it in overtime. But in OT, it was Curry. It was Al Horford hit a 3 to go up 1. Then Jonathan Kuminga had a transition bucket. It again, like game number 1, it truly was a contest that took an entire village. Everyone stepped up for the Warriors, but it was Steph Curry who did the most. And he did the most at the right time, scoring 16 straight for Golden State at one point to give the Warriors a big, big win over one of the best teams in basketball. Final score, 133 for the Warriors, 127 for the Nuggets. Check out the Locked On Warriors live postgame show that starts right about now.
The Utah Mammoth, the NHL's new expansion squad, continue to roll in their hot start to the season, in addition to having just an incredible name.
I've got a question for you. When are NHL teams going to learn that Utah is no longer a team you start the backup goaltender against? Now, look, they were when they were in Arizona, and maybe even last year, I get it. But this year, there's no way. This team is too good offensively. They are too much of a quick strike offense, and they have too many weapons. And they proved it tonight in St. Louis. They chased Hofer, 3 goals on 6 shots. Binnington came in, but didn't fare a whole lot better. He gave up 3, but faced 18 shots over 2.5 periods of work. Then they tack on an empty netter. 7-4 final. Great. Good offense. However, Utah still needs to make sure they don't go into that shell defensively towards the end of the game, especially in the third period. They retreated a bit, and St. Louis almost made them pay. But a big win to start a 4-game road swing for the Mammoth. And again, do not start your backup goaltender against Clayton Keller and company.
And the SEC is shelving longtime ref Ken Williamson for the rest of the season after Georgia's 20-10 win at Auburn turned into a rules circus. A goal line reach that was ruled a fumble and upheld on review swung the half. Auburn's AD and Hugh Freeze confronted Williamson at the tunnel. A targeting ejection arrived via replay, and later Kirby Smart's "they're clapping our cadence" plea briefly stopped the clock without costing Georgia a timeout. If you saw the video, you know that one was particularly ridiculous. Williamson had already told the league he planned to retire after the year, but this made it official early. The former NFL officiating boss called the penalty too harsh, but harsh or not, seeing officials actually being held accountable is probably going to be pretty delightful for a lot of sports fans. The World Series is upon us, and some are calling it David versus Goliath. Not so, according to Locked On Blue Jays host Braden Uasco and Carter First, who give their take on why Toronto can beat the seemingly unstoppable Dodgers.
It's frustrating, isn't it, to sit here as a Blue Jays fan and see what everybody's saying about this team as they have been all year?
It's frustrating, but it's exactly what I expected. Whether it was the Mariners, whether it was the Blue Jays, whether it was the Yankees even, it could have been anyone. If it was the Los Angeles Dodgers in the World Series, they were going to be the heavy favorites, the defending champions, the super team, the team with Shohei Ohtani, the unstoppable force. It was always going to be the Dodgers. We could have predicted this in March. Probably a lot of people, most people, the majority would have said the Los Angeles Dodgers were going to be in the World Series. On the flip side, I think nobody would have said that the Toronto Blue Jays were going to be in the World Series. But hey, here we are. And you look at the lineups, like we'll do a lot of comparing the lineups, pitching matchups, how the lineups look, which pitchers, which relief pitchers specifically are going to match up against which hitters in the Dodgers lineup, how the starting rotation looks. We're going to do a bunch of comparables, dive into all the stats later on this week. For this one, we're going to talk about just the overarching narrative surrounding this Toronto Blue Jays series. You look at every fan base, whether it's the Mariners, the Yankees, you can go to the NL, the Phillies, the Brewers, every single fan base, pretty much other than the Toronto Blue Jays, are picking the Los Angeles Dodgers. You go to these betting sites, you go ask insiders, you ask MLB analysts. Seems like it's the overwhelming theme that everyone is picking the Los Angeles Dodgers, which again, all of it makes sense. Defending champions, you look at experience, you're looking at name values, Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Teoscar Hernandez, Freddie Freeman. You go to the other side of the diamond, you got guys like Nathan Lucas, Addison Barger, Ernie Clement, some guys that, again, are definitely not household names, guys that have been in AAA or the minor leagues throughout their careers, guys that have been DFA'd, guys that weren't on the opening day roster, even starting in the MLB to start this season. So, yeah, it's the David versus Goliath narrative. If you're looking at it in terms of at least name value, definitely fits the picture. But if you're looking at this just in terms of wins in the regular season and how much does regular season wins now compared to what the playoffs is, that's its own debate. But the Toronto Blue Jays won 94 games. They won the American League. That's more wins than the Los Angeles Dodgers had. That's why the Toronto Blue Jays are hosting this series at home. And it's exactly like you said. It is baseball. Sometimes it only takes one swing of the bat. And you look at what they did to the Phillies, the Dodgers. You look at what they did to the Brewers. There's pretty much like big brother versus little brother in that series. The Milwaukee Brewers posted some of the worst offensive numbers ever in a postseason. So it is frustrating to see all the narratives, but I definitely see where they're coming from. But that just goes to show the Toronto Blue Jays are the underdog, and they've been an underdog a fair bit, especially at the start of the season, maybe getting their respect halfway through the season. Once again, returning to the underdogs in that New York Yankee series. I'd say they were the underdogs in totality. When you look around the major leagues, a lot of people were saying Seattle's roster was better. They were built better for the World Series. Toronto Blue Jays winning once again. So we're kind of getting used to this narrative. And this is the biggest battle that the Toronto Blue Jays are going to have and the biggest hurdle that they're going to have to overcome. But they've done it so many different times throughout the season. Why stop believing now?
Carter, that's exactly it. Why stop now? It blows my mind when people say this, because it's like they haven't been watching baseball a little bit, of why it's like, I don't even bother watching this. This is going to be the worst World Series ever because the Dodgers are just going to go back to back. I saw this one post that said, this is why we're in the worst period of baseball. This was their video. This isn't coming from me. This is what they said. we're in the worst period of baseball because the Dodgers are going to win back-to-back World Series. They're going to then go for a third to be a dynasty into a lockout. And I question it a little bit. Is this not the game that we all played and watched growing up? Baseball is strange. Mike Trout, arguably, before Shohei Ohtani, was considered the best baseball player, or could be one of the best baseball players to ever play the game. And he has never sniffed a World Series. At the end of the day, it's not who you have. It's who's hot, who shows up, who has the stuff that day. New York Yankees have Aaron Judge, and they thought he was going to be the savior of all saviors when it came to the Blue Jays. We don't got to worry. Aaron Judge is going to hit 97 home runs in the ALDS. What happened? Max Fried. What happened? Some of the Seattle pitching. Everybody said they were going to be the death of the Blue Jays. What happened? I'm at the point where I don't know what it is. And maybe it's because of what happened in Game 7. Sometimes it comes down to a little bit of magic of the moment. Which team has that feeling around them? I think it's hard to argue that the Blue Jays have that feeling. It feels a little magical. So, yeah, I think, to be honest, Carter, and I don't want to make my predictions yet or anything like that. We're going to get into that later in the week. I'm all in. I think screw what everybody has to say, just like the Blue Jays have done all season. Screw it.
Stay up to date all year on the Toronto Blue Jays by subscribing to Locked On Sports today and Locked On Blue Jays on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Coming up, an NBA coach and player have been arrested for gambling. X-ray glasses, contact lenses, sounds like an Austin Powers script, but this is real life. Blazers head coach Chauncey Billups and Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier have been arrested in an FBI sting tied to illegal gambling with mafia connections. Locked On NBA host Matt Moore and Hayes react to shocking news.
So Rozier was involved in this discussion, and the NBA had said that they had cleared him. The federal investigators had never cleared him, continued to kind of look at it. This is tied to the Jonte Porter stuff. It's an ongoing investigation that was broad. The fact that it involves the mafia, I think, is deeply scary and concerning and shows this kind of side of it. The Chauncey Billups part, I think, is the most impactful from a basketball standpoint. This is the head coach of an NBA team who's been arrested by the FBI. Like, that's an incredible story. One thing I would stress as this conversation unfolds is for if you are somebody that doesn't like to gamble and don't care for gambling, at least try and understand the mechanisms that are in place for why this got caught before making opinions or assertions. Like, I see a lot of folks that just don't know this side of things, and you need to understand how it happened, how it got caught, and what the consequences are, I think, before levying any sort of like, this is what should happen next.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a scandal, and it's definitely, something that is concerning when you talk about mafia ties and all that of what's going on. And especially after the Portland Trailblazers actually, led most of the way against the Minnesota Timberwolves, like the FBI said, no, we can't have too much more of that. But all jokes aside, like, this is a very serious matter. Have we ever had a sitting NBA coach arrested for anything, much less an FBI sting? I don't think so.
And finally, John Schneider wants his souvenirs back. Before Shohei Ohtani chose LA, he took a Blue Jays hat and apparently a jacket for Decoy, his dog, at a meeting with the Blue Jays in 2023. Now Ohtani is leading off the World Series in Toronto, fresh off a two-way rampage, while Schneider and the Jays are playing the ex-boyfriend role pretty well by continuing to ask for their clothes back. Don't know if you can act that way if you were never dating to begin with, but it sure seems like Toronto's going to try. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up, despite what both sides have said, we've got a revenge game for Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers as they host the Packers. So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.